Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Hello friends. So in this video we are going to talk about the vSphere high availability, that also known as vSphere HA. So basically vSphere HA is a feature in the vCenter that can restart a failed machine on an alternative host server to reduce the application downtime. So vSphere HA enables a server administrator to pool the physical servers on the same network in a logical group that called the high availability cluster. And during a server failure or system crash or power failure or network failure, vSphere HA detect which machine are down and restart that virtual machine on the another stable server within the cluster. And this process of restarting the failed virtual machines on the secondary host is called the failover. So in this video we will talk about the vSphere architectures and how it will respond in time of failure. So let us start. So first scenario is when your ESXi host goes down. So ESXi host failure. So in this situation, the vSphere HA detect that those particular virtual machines are running on that failed host and reboot those virtual machines to the another host. So if you look in this diagram, this VM A and VM B was running on the ESXi host, and due to some reason that host goes down. So these virtual machines will be run on the some other host, like virtual A will be restart on the on this host server, and virtual machine B will be restarted on the another host. So in case of host failure, the virtual machines will be restarted on the another host, those are able to provide the resource to those virtual machines. So this is our first scenario. The second scenario, if your virtual machine or the guest operating systems goes fail. So let's move to next slide. So guest operating system failure or virtual machine failure. So first of all, if you want to implement this kind of failure, you need to install the VMware tool inside your virtual machines, because without VMware tool, the vSphere HA unable to detect that failure. So in this failure, if some virtual machine or the operating systems goes crash, then vSphere HA restart that virtual machine on the same host server. So vSphere HA detect this failure with help of the heartbeat, virtual machine heartbeat, and those heartbeat will be provided by the VMware tool that are installed inside a virtual machine. So this is our second failure. The third failure is application failure. So in this situation, if some application running inside a virtual machine and that application goes fail, then vSphere HA restart that virtual machine on the same host. In this case also, the vSphere HA restart that virtual machine on the same host server. So in the guest operating system failure and application failure, the VM will be restarted on the same host, and we need VMware tool inside a virtual machine to detect this failure. So this is our third failure. The fourth failure is isolation. So isolation, basically it's the disconnectivity of the ESXi host. Let's suppose a host server is unable to communicate with the cluster because of some network failure, but host is running but network goes fail. So this is known as the network isolation. So in this situation we can enable this monitoring and allow the cluster to reboot the virtual machine. So by default, if our host goes if we face a network isolation situation, by default it is disabled, so the cluster will not take any decision, but we can enable it. If we enable the network isolation, then the cluster will reboot the virtual machines that are running on the host on the another host server. So basically the network isolations mean the hosts are unable to communicate with the cluster over the heartbeat network. Okay. So to detect the network isolation, we configured some isolation IP addresses on the host server. So if host is not receiving the heartbeat from the master host server, then it will try to ping with the isolation address, and if it's not able to ping with the isolation address, then the host declares itself as a network isolation. So in this situation, if we enable, then the virtual machines that are running on that host will be moved to the another host server. So this is our fourth failure. And the fifth failure is data store accessibility failure. So there is two kind of data store accessibility failure. One is APD, all path down. So this failure is recoverable and represent a transit or unknown accessibility loss due to the network or some other regions. So in the response, in this failure response, we can either generate an event or power off the virtual machines or restart the virtual machines on the another host that have still accessibility on the data store. So you can configure these type of actions. And the second kind of failure is the permanent device loss. So basically it's unrecoverable, occur when storage device report that the data store is no longer accessible by the host. So basically if a data store is removed from the host or a data store is deleted from the storage server, in this situation this permanent device loss would happen. So in the response of this failure, you can generate an event or you can allow to power off or reboot the virtual machine to the another host that have still accessibility on the data store. So vSphere HA provide the protection for the virtual machines from the 5 type of failures: host failures, guest OS failures, application failure, network isolations, and data store accessibility failure. So now let's move to the architecture. So here, so in this diagram, we have 3 host servers. This one, this is second one, this is our first one, this is our third one. Okay, and they have the accessibility on the data store. So basically we can say these are some kind of the shared data stores. So when we enable the HA, a FDM service will be start on all the hosts that are the member of cluster. This service will be automatically start on the member of clusters when we enable the HA, and all the hosts will communicate with each others. Basically vCenter communicate with host via the VPXA service, and host communicate with this FDM service via the host D. So host D and FDM service will be communicate with each other. Okay. So each host have their FDM service. So this service is responsible to manage the vSphere HA. Now in this cluster we have 3 hosts. So one host will be the master of this cluster. So if you look in this diagram, this host is the master of cluster, and the remaining host is subordinate host servers. So you can the slave server, slave host, or subordinate host. Only one will be the master in a cluster, and there is a process to elect a master. So there is a process of choose which one will be the master. So we will discuss what will be the election process. So first we talk about this FDM, Fault Domain Manager. So this service is automatically enable and start on each host that are member of the HA cluster. Then, and all these hosts will be communicate with the master via this FDM service. So subordinate host master service will be communicate with the FDM service on the master host. Okay. And the vCenter server provide the list of virtual machines that are running on the virtual machine to the master host, and then master host update this list in their local database. And if any host goes fail, then it will find out these virtual machine was running on that host. Then master host will reboot those virtual machines on the another host server. So master host will store all the statics of virtual machines that are running on the all hosts. Now the election process. So the election process is is like that. So first condition is that in the group of hosts, the master will be chosen based on the maximum number of data store. So a host will be choose the master who has the maximum number of data stores. So let's suppose you have a case in which you have more than one host that have the number of maximum data store. So in this condition, the second instance will be used is MOID, Manage Object ID. So if the maximum number of data stores are equal in the more than one host, then the master host will be chosen based on the MOID. So a host who has the maximum number of managed object identifier, that will be chosen as a master host. So that is the election process in a HA cluster, and all these hosts will be communicate with each other over the management network. So this will be your management network, and over this network all the hosts will be communicate with each other. So let's move to the heartbeat section. Basically the master host check host is running or not using the heartbeats. So let's go to the heartbeat section. So this is the heartbeat section. So the network heartbeat will be sent over the management network. So master host send the heartbeat to each ESXi host that is the part of HA cluster, and the subordinary host respond for that heartbeat. So like that, the subordinary host and master host will synchronize each other. They are running. If any host goes fail, then it will miss the heartbeats, and based on the heartbeat, a master host detect which host is running and which host goes failed. Okay. So for so according to the VMware, we need VMware recommend configure at least 2 management networks, because by chance if one management network goes down, then your cluster will be imbalanced, like there is some happening some misconfiguration. So create a redundant management network. So if one network goes down, then slave host and master host will communicate with each other through the alternative management network. So this is the recommendation by the VMware, but you can run a HA cluster on a single management network. It's not a hard recommendation, it's a soft recommendation. Third is Datastore heartbeat. So this is our network heartbeat. This is the primary heartbeat communication channel. Then we have a backup heartbeat communication channel, that is the shared Datastore heartbeats. So we configure a Datastore for the heartbeat. So each host store their heartbeats on the shared Datastores. So this heartbeat channel is used if your main network heartbeat channel goes fail, then master host use this channel to check host is failed or it's isolated. So basically Datastore heartbeats are used to detect the host is failed or it's isolated. So each host write their heartbeat on the master host on the Datastore. So if any host writing the heartbeat on the Datastore but not responding for the heartbeats over the management network, then master host realize that the host is running but it's unable to communicate over the management networks, mean the host is isolated. It's not failed, it's isolated. So it choose the action according to the isolation settings. So there is some prerequisites to configure HA cluster. So first of all hosts must be configured with a static IP address. If you are using the DHCP, then you need to print the IP, or you need to map the IP address with MAC address to prevent the IP change. Then all hosts must have at least one management network common, and the virtual machine that you want to protect for HA must be on a shared Datastore, And to monitor the virtual machines, if you want to detect and prevent the application failure or virtual machine failure, you need to install the VMware tool inside a virtual machine. Okay, so this is prerequisites. So this is our first video. In this video we talk about the vSphere HA. In our next video we will create a HA clusters and test the failover scenarios. So wait for the next video. In the next part we will create a lab setup for vSphere HA cluster. So thank you so much for watching this video. Like this video and subscribe my channel for more update. Again, thank you so much.